Araceli, Sebastián,
Hola Isabel, ¿cómo
Hola
estás?
Isabel,
muy bien. Santiago, ¿cómo
bien
estás? Muy buenos
Santiago.
días.
Hola Isabel, muy buenos días.
Muy buenos días. Ulises, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo te va?
Hola, hola, buenos días.
Buenos días. Perdón que de último momento tuvimos que hacer estos ajustes porque estamos usando las nuevas tecnologías de inteligencia artificial para la traducción. Y bueno, ya saben que siempre hay una curva de aprendizaje, entonces no nos dejaba usar la liga que ya habíamos creado. Vamos a dar unos minutitos nada más porque creo que está todo el mundo recibiendo el nuevo enlace y nos arrancamos. Si vamos a darnos hasta las 9:05, ¿les parece bien? Porque bueno, veo que mucha gente igual se está preguntando. ¿Dónde está la reunión? ¿A dónde se me
Correcto.
fueron todos?
Bonito,
Pero
esperamos.
en, en unos minutitos, ¿eh? Muchísimas gracias por su paciencia.
Y ya hay todo. No, dice aquí, dale, no me acuerdo. Colapso el puerto, ya la leí. Vámonos.
Un minutito más, ya tenemos a muchos conectados, pero tenemos un grupo grande en el registro, entonces nada más para dar unos minutitos más. Y también estamos esperando a nuestro colega de Kenia, Jit. A ver, no lo veo yo, Gaby.
Ya
¿Tú?
está aquí,
Aquí
¿eh?
está.
¿Ya?
Sí, aquí
Perfecto.
estoy. Sí.
Perfecto. Hola, Jit. Hi, how are you? Good morning. Good night for you.
Hola, buenos días. No, I'm in California.
Ah, you're in California.
It's morning
Ah,
my time as
excellent.
well.
All right. Very morning for you. Well, the good thing is that it's only 1 hour difference this time of the year. It's not that bad. So, okay, excellent. So, I think we should start. Gaby, te paso la palabra.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And sorry for the delay and the confusions. We had technical issues, so we had to change the Zoom link. I just want to give a quick updates or announcements. As you can see, we have the Talo AI translator. This AI is going to be used since one portion of the webinar is going to be in Spanish. So whoever needs or wants the translation in English, you can find on the chat a link. You just access it and it's going to pop up in another page, and you'll be able to hear the translations once the speaking in Spanish proportion of the webinar starts. So it's really easy to use, and that's just one of the updates. And now we can officially start. If I can ask our panelists to open their videos so we can see them. Thank you so much. We have an international panel from specifically the Global South. As you know, this is a webinar focused on electric buses and the success cases. And we're very happy to have renowned specialists in this area. I'm gonna head and give the voice to Elim Lubiano, who's gonna help moderating this webinar. So thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Elim Lubiano. So on behalf of the Alliance for Sustainable Mobility, I'd like to welcome you to this panel. We truly appreciate your presence and your interest in one of the most crucial conversations for the future of passenger transport in our region. And before we begin, let me share with you why this dialogue is so timely and relevant. Across the world, we hear more and more about the transition to electromobility. Government set ambitious targets, cities announce new electric fleets, and companies commit to reducing emissions. But behind these big headlines, there's still a key question. How do we actually make this transition happen step by step in our streets, in our cities, and in our communities? One of the main goals of our alliance is precisely to help shape better mobility in the broadest sense. We believe that every citizen should have the possibility to choose how they move and have the guarantees to do it safely, sustainable, and affordable. Whether by bus, train, bicycle, or by walking, the right to accessible and reliable mobility must be at the heart of every solution we design. Today's panel is about closing the gap between ambition and action. We are fortunate to hear directly from people who are turning plans into reality, facing challenges, testing ideas, and showing what's possible when there's commitment and collaboration. For Mexico in particular, this is even more significant. We have pioneering companies here that are already laying out groundwork, testing technologies, adapting routes, and setting an example that can inspire others in the region. So with this conversation, we aim to answer critical questions. Where are we starting from? What are the barriers that we should expect? And most importantly, what partnerships, policies, and financial models really can make the change happen? Thank you for being here and for being part of this essential journey toward a cleaner, smarter, and more equitable transport systems. I would like to make a brief introduction of the distinguished participants who are with us today in our panel. Jit Bhattacharya, co-founder and CEO of BasicGo. Jit is the co-founder and CEO of BasicGo, a company headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya, working to electrify Africa's public transport system. Jit has been a leader in electric vehicle lithium-ion battery technology for the past 15 years. He served as CEO of Mission Motors, a Silicon Valley company developing high-performance EV technology. He later served as a senior manager in the Special Projects Group at Apple. In 2017, he became Chief Technology Officer for Finnish International, one of Africa's leading technology access companies, delivering modern energy systems to over 500,000 homes in sub-Saharan Africa before being acquired by Engie in 2019. Prior to launching BasicGo, he served as the Kenya-based principal with Factor Ventures, one of the first venture capital funds to invest in e-mobility in Africa. Jit holds a Master in Engineering from Stanford University and a Master's in Business Administration from the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Jit. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sebastián Galarza, Executive Director, Centro de Movilidad Sostenible. As Executive Director of Center of Sustainable Mobility, CMS, Sebastián Galarza supports the development of public policies aimed to decarbonizing the transportation sector in Latin America and the Caribbean. He works closely with government authorities and technical teams to advance electrification in public transit, commercial fleets, and private vehicles. He previously worked at the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C., the International Council on Clean Transportation, ICCT, in San Francisco, and the Mario Molina Center in Chile. He holds degrees from the University of Sussex and the University of Chicago. Originally from Ecuador, he has been living in Chile since 2015. Sebastián, good morning and welcome to this panel.
Muchas gracias, Delim. Happy to be here.
Santiago Alaniz Uriarte, General Manager, Mivipsa in Mobility ADO. Santiago Alaniz is a mobility services and strategic partnership expert with over 14 years at Mobility ADO. He currently leads the company's largest urban e-mobility project operating Mexico City's Metrobus Line 3, the first to integrate 60 fully electric buses serving 200,000 passengers daily. He holds a degree in information system engineering from Universidad Iberoamericana, a marketing diploma from Tecnológico de Monterrey, an international MBA for EADA in Barcelona, and a specialization in digital transformation from MIT. Alaniz has held key roles including regional commercial manager and general manager of the Intelligent Transport Information Center, City, overseeing monitoring and operations of all 7 Metrobus lines in Mexico City, handling 1.8 million daily passengers. Welcome, Santiago.
Thank you, Elim. Good morning to everyone.
Ulises Hernández, Director of Intelligence, Flecha Amarilla. Ulises Hernández is the Director of Intelligence at Grupo Flecha Amarilla, a leading mobility company in Mexico. He is an industrial engineer from University of León and holds 2 master's degrees, one in transit and transportation engineering from Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla, and another in corporate finance from Universidad de La Salle Bajío. He has also completed executive programs at IPADE in digital transformation and executive leadership, and CEO training at Tecnológico de Monterrey. Ulises is the co-creator of Yellow Hub, Flecha Amarilla's open innovation initiative, startup studio, and corporate venture capital platform. With over 18 years of experience in the mobility sector, he is deeply passionate about driving innovation and sustainable solutions in transportation. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Ulises.
Gracias, Elim. Buen día a todos.
Welcome, everyone. We're truly excited to hear your insights and comments. And before we move directly into the dialogue, I'd like to invite Dr. Isabel Studer, President of Sostenibilidad Global and leader of the Alliance for Sustainable Mobility, to share a few reflections and give us some context about the electrification of transport in the Global South. Please, Isabel.
Thank you so much, Elim. Well, I want to start with a huge applause to Elim because he has been the leader behind this dialogue. We've been talking about having such a magnificent panel of perspectives around the Global South for a very long time. Elim, he is the Director General of the National Chamber of Passengers and Tourism, and this chamber in Mexico has been having a leading role in terms of promoting the electrification of mass transit. So I want to congratulate you, Elim, for all the work that you have been doing, not only to be such a great partner at the Alliance, but also, for your trajectory and all the knowledge that you bring to the table. I will be very, very briefly because we would really want to hear from the experts, but I just wanted to take a moment to say very, very, in a very, succinct way that the electric buses matter for sustainable transportation. I know that most people, when we talk about electrification of transport, we immediately connect to the electric car. But I believe, and it's our belief, the Alliance for Sustainable Transport, that electrification of buses is one of the most impactful steps cities can take to decarbonize transport. Obviously, as high-capacity fixed-route vehicles, buses move far more people using far less space than private cars. We would be not only solving many of the problems that we face in cities, reducing congestion, alleviating the air pollution, and obviously reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This is something that is so critical, especially for cities in the Global South. We see that urbanization is creating so many problems in terms of the urban congestion and also in terms of inequalities, because it does affect much more, those urban settlers who cannot afford having a car or even maintaining a car. So we know that the electrification of cars is an absolute necessity if we see it from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective. But electric cars alone cannot solve all these problems that we are facing around transportation in urban settings. So we know that prioritizing public transit electrification over private electric vehicles is essential to reduce not only, as I mentioned, urban congestion, but also inequality. Electric buses enable cleaner, quieter, and more efficient mobility for the many, not just the few. Moreover, electric buses offer long-term operational savings due to lower energy and maintenance costs. For this transition to be truly sustainable, it must include clean power sources, as is happening already with many of the solutions that we will hear from today. We need ethical battery supply chains. This, I could not emphasize more the importance of having not only clean, but also ethical supply chains when it comes to extraction of minerals, and obviously inclusive policies that expand access to quality mobility while creating local jobs. And just let me close by saying that at Sostenibilidad Global, our Alliance for Sustainable Mobility for All, as Selim already very eloquently stated, we are committed to a just, inclusive, and aligned transition with the climate agenda. We represent over 500 companies, 6 state governments, and civil society organizations that are committed to this agenda. So for us, electrifying public transport is not just a technological upgrade. It's a strategic, systemic shift toward healthier, more livable cities. And now we would like to hear from the experts about the very exciting activities, the many exciting initiatives, and really, seeing how the champions are taking this lead and setting the example for many others to follow if we want to, again, not only address climate change, but also in urban settings that are more equal and accessible to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stutter, for your kind words towards me and also for setting the stage for this important conversation. Let me briefly explain how we'll proceed. We will have 2 blocks in this panel. The first, each participant will have up to 10 minutes for their presentations, and then we will move into an open dialogue where I will pose some questions and give each speaker up to 5 minutes just to share their thoughts and reactions. And to wrap up this activity, we will open the floor for a Q&A session with the audience, so you can put your questions into the chat. Just to open our discussion and to hear the expert, just as the Dr. Studer said, I'd like to start with a general question for all the speakers. What were the key challenges you face in electrification process, and how were you able to overcome them to make progress? And now I'd like to invite Jit to share some of his experience. We're excited to hear how BasicGo has navigated these challenges in Africa's unique context. So Jit, thank you, and we hear you.
Great. And are you able to see my screen?
Yes, thank you, Jit.
Okay, great. And I'm going to go into slideshow mode and just confirm you can still see it?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Very, very good. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share what's happening in the electrification of public transport in Kenya. So my name is Jit. I think you heard a little bit of my background. I have been, I'm American, but I've been living in Kenya now for almost 7 years. And at BasicGo, we were founded in 2021, so we're still very much a startup company. and our focus is on the electrification of public transport in sub-Saharan Africa. To give some context, public transport still remains the primary mode of transport for the vast majority of people living in Africa, and especially in the urban environments in places like Nairobi, which is the capital of Kenya. So in Nairobi, we actually have 20,000 buses for a population of approximately 5 million people. A recent study by the government found that 70% of people are using a bus every single day, 70% of the people living in the city. So buses are the most affordable, the most accessible mode of transport for everybody. And the one other thing that's very unique about Africa's public transport system is that it's still primarily private sector. So these 20,000 buses, they're actually all privately owned. They are not government. It's a very lightly regulated market. There's no fare regulation. There's only a small degree of regulation from the government in terms of providing licenses to these bus operators to run. So it's an entirely private sector market, and that remains quite common across the African continent. These buses are providing a vital service, but they're also an enormous problem. The two problems that have really been dominating in the past few years is that most African countries are importing 100% of our transport fuel, and we are importing it in US dollars. And so fuel imports are the largest use of foreign currency reserves. And the moment that US interest rates began to rise back in 2022, this became an enormous problem for the economy. And we were in a full fuel crisis in Kenya, where you were only allowed to put a few dollars worth of fuel in your car. The currency began to rapidly depreciate, and we saw this across the continent. What happened is that most governments had to remove fuel subsidies at that point. And so we've seen fuel prices in Africa rise as much as 100% in the last 2 years. So that's one problem. The second problem is the emissions. In these privately operated diesel buses, quite often the operators remove the diesel emissions filter in order to improve the fuel efficiency. And so you can be driving behind a vehicle that is all of 2 months old, and it's emitting the most toxic black soot you can imagine. And we were given a glimpse of what would happen if we could clean up this sector in Kenya. In April 2020, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, for 3 days, the government of Kenya stopped all the diesel buses from running in Nairobi. And overnight, the air completely cleared, and we were able to see Mount Kenya 350 kilometers away behind the Nairobi skyline for the first time in 30 years. Most Kenyans forgot that you used to be able to see the mountain from the city every single day. This is the impact of cleaning up the bus sector in Kenya. And we have a unique opportunity in Kenya to do this because in Kenya, but really across the East African region, we have an abundance of renewable energy. Over 90% of Kenya's electricity already comes from renewable energy, primarily hydropower and geothermal. But not just that, actually at night, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 in the morning, we had 800 gigawatt hours of surplus geothermal and wind that had to be curtailed because of a lack of demand at night. And as we are aware, electric buses are primarily recharging at night. So from a climate point of view, from a socioeconomic point of view, electrification of this massive public transport fleet in markets like Kenya and across East Africa, it provides so many different benefits, but climate is one of them. So when we talk about replacing just one of the diesel buses, one of the 20,000 diesel buses in the city of Nairobi with one of our electric buses, which is the same size, traveling the same kilometers, we replace 20,000 liters of imported diesel with 50 megawatt hours of domestic electricity consumption. We mitigate over 50 tons of CO2 per year, so massive impact on climate emissions. We completely eliminate those harmful tailpipe emissions. And then more importantly, when we look at the relative cost of diesel in our market compared to electricity, the total cost of ownership of the electric bus without government subsidies is much lower than the diesel bus. So the electric bus is able to compete without government subsidies in our private sector market. What is the problem? Why are electric buses not everywhere? Well, the reason is the high upfront cost. Because in an emerging market like Africa, the problem is our cost of capital is very high. Your typical automotive loan is 20 to 25%. And the cash sensitivity for down payments is very high from these private operators. And so that is the fundamental problem that Basigo has been working to solve. Our key innovation is what we call the pay-as-you-drive lease. The pay-as-you-drive lease is an EV as a service model, as we've seen in many Western countries. So rather than selling the buses to these private operators, Basigo leases it to them through a mileage-based lease. In this model, Basigo is raising the equity as well as the debt to be able to purchase the bus, the battery, the charging infrastructure. And then the owner is paying us every day to basically rent the bus. But that rental fee, that mileage-based fee, also includes all the costs of charging as well as the cost of service and maintenance. In this model, the bus operator is bringing the bus back to us every single night. So we are inspecting it. We're managing all the maintenance. We're also making sure that it gets charged and it's ready for operations again the next morning by 5 in the morning. And so we have a high degree of control over this asset, because a key element of what we have to do is we're now going out into the capital markets to raise the both equity as well as the debt to be able to capitalize this rapidly growing fleet. Now, this model has many pieces in order to make it work. And you asked about challenges, Alim. I think the biggest challenge for us doing this in Africa is the value chain is so immature that we find ourselves having to vertically integrate at the beginning. We have to do everything until this market is more mature. So what are some examples of everything we have to do? Number one, we're importing buses as CKD kits, and we are locally assembling them in Kenya. So manufacturing is one piece you have to do. This is a photo from our bus assembly line located 40 kilometers outside of Nairobi. Second is we deploy the charging infrastructure. So we currently have 7 DC fast charging depots deployed. And you can see from the map, because this is not a government-run bus system, our depot network starts to look a lot like a public charging network, even though it is still depot charging. And so we deploy the charging depots directly along the bus operating routes, such that they're very convenient for these private operators to be able to access a depot for charging every single night. What's exciting is that we can deploy this charging infrastructure with the buses as the primary off-taker and justify the investment from that. However, during the day when the buses are operating, we actually opened up this network for charging of passenger cars as well as other commercial vehicles as well. So it's serving a dual purpose. We provide all the service and maintenance, meaning we're stocking the spare parts, we're training our team, and we are making sure that these buses remain in operation. And in fact, we provide the private operators with a 90% uptime guarantee against their lease. And this is how the fleet is performing. So Basigo currently has 100 buses in operation between 2 markets, Kenya and Rwanda. So we have 70 buses operating in Kenya, 30 in Rwanda. The fleet is driving 550,000 kilometers every single month, carrying 600,000 passengers per month, mitigating over 250 tons of CO2 emissions every month, avoiding 140,000 liters of diesel each month. And on average, each bus is down less than 2 days per month, which is much better than the diesels, which are down typically 4 to 5 days per month. On top of all of this, I have to emphasize that these electric buses, these are Chinese electric buses. So, you know, the electric bus technology is not our technology. This is coming from the leading manufacturers in China. However, compared to the diesel buses, this is a much higher quality of service in terms of the quality of the bus that passengers rely on every single day. And that's been a really exciting impact of what we are doing as well. So how is it performing? I'll show you quickly the economics. I think this is the most interesting part. So of our 50 36-seat electric buses currently operating in Nairobi, the typical contract is an $11,380 deposit that the operator pays us, plus 50 cents per kilometer for that pay-as-you-drive lease. Right now, our typical operator is earning over $1,300 per month of net income. That's after all expenses, after paying us our lease fee, after paying their drivers, their cooperative fees, everything. They're netting $1,300 a month in cash income. So they're earning back their deposit within 9 months. And you compare that with the current diesel buses in the market here in Nairobi, where it takes them 4 years to break even. And even when they own that diesel bus, even though in our model they don't own the electric bus, even when they own that diesel bus, they're still only earning a net income that is matching what they're earning from the e-bus. So because of these economics, we have overwhelming demand from bus operators. We've currently received deposits from bus operators. Remember, these are all private sector. We've received over 860 deposits. So we have a 3-year backlog for deliveries right now for us to meet the current demand, which is incredibly exciting. And on the back end of this, when we look at that same lease contract, where me and my co-founder got particularly excited is for this massive climate impact of 50 tons of CO2 per year. We're actually able to get to a 30% USD equity IRR for each individual electric bus. So when we take this to infrastructure investors, this is now a competitive rate of return for us to be able to go and capitalize these leases for this rapidly growing fleet. And we think that's very important. And now we have taken where we began with city buses, we're now actually expanding. So actually just yesterday, I'm so excited about this. If you go to Africa, you will note that the city buses tend to be the larger minibuses, typically anywhere from 7.5 to 10 meter. However, the dominant public transport is still the informal paratransit van. There's over 1 million of these in operation across Africa, 80,000 in just the country of Kenya. And so we've now even expanded this same pay-as-you-drive model into electric vans for intercity operations, so bringing the benefits of electric outside of the capital cities. And with the electric vans, the current economics look like we should be able to triple the return on investment for the private operators while still earning that 30% USD IRR now within 5 years, simply because of how much the vans drive. Higher mileage means more competitiveness for the electrics in this private sector market. And so the 300 to 400 kilometers they're driving every day means the electric is very, very competitive. So we're quite excited about this product. I had to share it today. And I think one of the core messages that I would share here is I think there's been a bit of a myth that electrification typically needs to wait for government to come in and formalize a public transport market. What we're finding in Africa is the opposite's the case. In fact, in this informal, entirely private sector market, we are market driven. This is entirely demand driven, and we don't face some of the other barriers that might be in place if this was a government run public transport system. We're finding that a private sector market is actually able to electrify potentially even faster than a more formal government run system. So we're quite excited. Our plan is to deploy 1,000 electric buses in the next 3 years. However, this pay-as-you-drive platform, we really see it as a financing platform to accelerate the adoption of commercial electric vehicles across geographies and across vehicle types. So this is what's happening right now in sub-Saharan Africa. And thank you again for the chance to share our story.
Thank you, Jit. It was a great presentation. I mean, the lesson scheme is very interesting. It helps to reduce one of the biggest barriers. I mean, talking here in Mexico, the initial investment, I mean, especially for the small transport. And also it's very innovative for electric vehicles. I mean, there are some schemes for the diesel, but not for electrical vehicles. And also, I was very pleased to hear that because it can be an alternative to formalize the informal transportation. I mean, here in Mexico, it's estimated that for every authorized operator, they could be 3, probably 4 informal ones. So that could be a good chance, not just to address the transition to electric fleets, but also to address some other problems. So thank you very much.
I think I'll just add one comment on that, though, because it's really important. The cities in Africa are growing so fast. So Nairobi is expected to grow to a population of 10 million people within the next 10 to 20 years. And as these grow, we're going to need formal public transport, right? We need those main corridors, but the private informal market is still going to be incredibly critical. And we think, once again, the informal market can actually lead the way to electrification ahead of even the formalization.
You're on mute, Alim. Yeah.
Thank you, Jet. Probably on the second round, we can go deeper in that topic. So, Sebastian, I'll go with you. Chile has emerged as a regional leader in electric bus deployment, and especially when we think in Santiago's public transport system. What have been the key drivers for this success? Could you explain and give us some details?
Of course, Aline, thank you so much for the invitation. Please let me know if you can see my slides, and I'll move ahead and start going through the presentation. Can you see them?
Yes, we can see them.
Perfect, great. So I think this complements nicely with Jit's presentation regarding Kenya because it shows this history. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the history of electrification, but also of regulation in terms of the public transportation sector here in Santiago de Chile, and talk about some of the lessons that we've seen come out of this process of electrification. So first of all, I just want to give a little bit of a spotlight in terms of why we're talking about this and why this is important, particularly for the Latin American and Caribbean region. We know that 80% of public transport trips are made by bus in the region. The bus is the main mode of public transportation in the region, and it also accounts for 25% of urban transport emissions. So it's crucial to tackle this mode. There's over 700,000 buses operating already in the region. Average age of these buses is over 10 years old. These are old technologies, mostly diesel and mostly, contaminating modes of transportation. At the same time, public transportation receives very little investment relative to other areas of the economy that receive support. And also, we have a lot of we still have a lot of informal systems, as those shown by Jeet in Kenya. This is a reality in a lot of the cities in our region, particularly in smaller cities. And finally, just to mention that we also have opportunities in terms of, a lot of BRT systems that are operating in the region. These are systems that are very ripe for electrification. And finally, in terms of, this a gender component of this is also crucial to mention. 60% of users of the public transportation system are women. So there's a lot of issues around these themes that are important to keep in context, but also to show how electrification has helped also move the needle in so many of these issues in the case of Santiago. So lesson one from our end is set verifiable fleet electrification goals. And this is something that has spurred conversation more than anything, because these are not binding goals. The idea, I think, and one of the things that we've seen so far work the best is when we have binding electrification goals, but already setting the stage for saying, by 2035, we're only going to buy electric buses, sell electric commercial vehicles, etc. Sets a timeline for working towards that goal. And what we've seen in the case of Santiago and electric buses, that timeline has we've reached that timeline earlier than we thought, and every time we've been able to push it even further in. So we moved very rapidly towards electrification, and that has to do also with lesson two, which is closing these regulatory gaps in terms of public transportation systems. So there's a long history over the past half century, really, of formalizing the public transportation system in Chile. So we went through a period where, again, movements towards, recognizing how polluting buses are. Looking at this, the picture on your right, where you're seeing all these yellow buses, is the first instances when we tried to regularize public transportation system, and the bus operators were not very happy. And that had to do with also a process of deregulation that went through the 80s in particular, where basically public transportation was deregularized, and the number of buses operating in the streets just ballooned. And the efforts made since returning to democracy in 1990 to the early 2000s was made on controlling the size of that fleet. So just making sure that that fleet is, properly regulated, not ballooning. And since then, the focus has been on vehicle technology. So Santiago, for example, was the first city in South America to demand that all new buses comply with the Euro 6 emission standard in 2018. And that already set the stage for moving towards electrification, because in terms of already total cost of ownership, you're internalizing a lot of the cost of controlling for those emissions with the most stringent technologies, but at the same time, you're making more competitive the cleaner technologies that are the electric vehicles, the electric buses that we've seen take off in the country already. And that takes us to lesson three. How did this happen? Through public-private partnerships that have increased investment in this area. So what we saw happen, and what was crucial to basically making sure that these business models, or that we could have innovation in these business models that have to do with a number of different companies already playing, coming in together to work out these issues, including private operators, utility companies, but also manufacturers, bus manufacturers. It's crucial to have also a public system that supports these processes through guarantees, through a strong financial entity that supports the regulatory makeup of the public transportation system, because this is a completely formalized transportation systems, different to the case of Kenya that Jit was showing. But what this allowed is this allowed for investment certainty to scale these pilots and these smaller operations. So we moved very quickly from having 2 buses, 4 buses, 8 buses to 100 buses, 200 buses, 400 buses. And this was done through innovation in terms of the business models, but also the government guarantees that gave investment certainty for this risk to be taken up. And the result of this is amazing. We've had over $1.3 billion mobilized to electrify Santiago's fleet since 2019. And again, showing those numbers earlier on, only 1% of investment goes to public transportation. Having $1.3 billion invested to electrify the public transportation system in Santiago is a huge number to already be proud of, and also to show the business case around these processes as well. Lesson 4, scaling electric fleets through competitive public tenders. What I showed previously were efforts to renew fleets by private operators, but really the scale, being able to really drive scale through transformation, we've seen by innovating also in terms of the contractual obligations that operators have, but also in the way that we structure and we structure risk around these operations. So one of the large efforts that was made in 2019 was to reduce the risk being taken up by private operators in a system that, again, just to clarify, we have a public transportation agency that contracts out a service, which is the provision of fleets and the operation of these fleets by private actors. So in Chile, we have this mixed system. It's similar to what we see also in places like London or Singapore or other places like Bogota in the region, or also in Mexico City as well. And one of the things that was done in 2019 is split up this segmentation of the contracts to allow for third-party actors to come in and to be able to finance fleet provision. And this basically split the risk up in terms of, one, making sure that operators are not too big to fail, which was an issue that we had in Santiago, but also making sure that we had third parties that could finance these operations that were not traditional actors. This included utility companies, but also multilateral development banks and other interested parties that were interested in financing these systems, because again, we had investment certainty through government guarantees, and you could see a return of investment in these operations. And that's what we've seen happen over the course of the last few years, where we've had competitive tenders that have been able to scale rapidly the introduction of electric buses. The first tender was actually a mixed tender, so operators could choose whether they went electric or diesel, but in the majority of cases, they went electric. And since then on, we are only tendering electric buses. And also, why is this important? It's also because the scale of these purchases means that the price has dropped substantially between the first electric buses that we bought in 2019 to what we're seeing now. So there's already been a 40% drop in the capital cost of these buses due to technology, but also the size and scale of these operations. And we're already reaching almost parity in terms of the price of the vehicle, which means that in terms of operations, it's just going to destroy everything else. And we're moving very, very quickly towards electrification. And also, again, Chile does not produce any fossil fuels, or very, very small amounts of fossil fuels. So we import all this diesel. And this is, again, money that the country is saving. The other opportunity that we have when we look at public tenders is the opportunity to include other aspects that are crucial also for moving towards, these formal and well-structured public transportation systems, including making sure that we have prepaid zones, for example, to reduce non-payment from users, making sure that all actors engage with renewable energy supply. So all the electric buses that are operated in Santiago de Chile, as well as the metro system, actually operates on 100% renewable contracts. So it's a closed loop. We're making sure we take advantage of that. We're also ensuring that we increase certification and female participation in the workforce when we're doing this. And this is also some of the opportunities that we have when we engage with these supply side regulations in terms of these large scale procurements. Lesson 5, ensure timely planning of upgrades and infrastructure with utilities. Here we're talking about large-scale operations similar to what we're seeing in Mexico City. Again, just as a comparison as well, Santiago and Nairobi have very similar sizes in terms of population, so cities in terms of size that are quite similar. And in terms of how we're electrifying this large fleet of around 7,000 buses, it means that we need to invest a lot in power capacity, and being able to plan this with time and making sure that we have the availability of power is crucial to ensuring the operations of these buses. And this needs to be done in a timely manner to ensure that this happens and it doesn't put any pressure on the operation of the buses, because again, what we're looking is to move people, and that needs to have a certain amount of certainty as well. Another lesson is ensuring that electrification expands beyond the major cities. And this is something that we've also seen in Santiago lately, particularly with this administration. There's been a stronger focus to try to replicate Santiago's model, also with other government programs to support this process in other cities across the region. And even one city here, Copiapó, which is in the north of the country, where most of the minerals that Chile has are located, will be the first city with a fleet of 100% electric vehicles operating in Latin America. So that's happening at the end of this year. Hopefully, the buses just arrived, so we'll hopefully have some more news around that. But that is happening very fast, and we're seeing how that is also expanding to different areas. And finally, the need to include training programs from pilots to scale. Something that we've seen so many times is that we do not really take advantage of pilot programs to really ensure learning. And that learning has to go through all levels of personnel, from the CEO to the security guard. Everyone needs to know what an electric bus is, how you move around it, making sure that, sometimes you don't hear these vehicles. Everyone needs to be there's an opportunity for learning at so many different scales with these technologies, which also brings up different opportunities for there's business models and business cases to thrive upon, but also opportunities for learning and getting a more educated workforce. Finally, what have been the results so far? Very impressive. Chile leads the way in terms of electrification in buses in Latin America and the Caribbean. Almost half of all the electric buses operating in Latin America and the Caribbean are located in Santiago de Chile. But this is something that is also moving very quickly around the region as we're seeing the opportunities that electrification has. We're already operating around 40% of our fleet is already electric. And by the end of this year, we should be reaching 69% with the tenders that I showed previously in place, plus fleet renewals that are happening already and where operators are already choosing to go electric by themselves. So this is also very impressive in terms of the scale and rapidity in terms of how fast we're conducting this process. And finally, in terms of emissions, which is also one of the core issues that we deal with, we've seen substantial drops in doing this. And again, something that Isabel mentioned earlier, and one of the things that we also try to highlight as much as possible is that it is crucial to focus on public transportation electrification as the gateway, as the opportunity to really introduce electrification to different modes. And also because it allows for a lot of the public transportation users that do not have access to a private vehicle to enjoy the benefits of electrification, not only by having better buses, better quality of service, buses that include Wi-Fi, air conditioning, et cetera, but also because the emissions from these buses are dropping substantially, including CO2, particulate matter, NOx emissions that are also very detrimental to public health, but finally noise. And noise reduction is something that sometimes, is, even myself, because we focus so much on climate and emissions, I sometimes forget about the benefits of noise reduction. And these are humongous and very important to highlight as well. So with that, we close. Thank you again for this opportunity, and happy to keep talking about some of these lessons and the experiences that we've seen in Santiago and other cities across the region that have moved towards electrification.
Thank you, Sebastian, for those very valuable lessons. I would like to highlight that there's no one size fits all solution, and especially for those companies here in Mexico that are taking into consideration to start thinking about the electrification processes. I think that those lessons will be very, very important for them. And also, I would like to highlight that we must commit and collaborate just to integrate all the stakeholders. I mean, there's no way that we can do it alone. So that's very valuable. Thank you very much. So moving on the Mexico's reality. I mean, Mexico has been gradually moving forward the path toward electrification. And we have achieved some milestones like the enactment of the General Mobility Law and the development of national mobility and electrification strategy. However, in practice, only a limited number of concrete projects have been implemented so far. What is the outlook for the passenger transport electrification from the perspective of the private sector? I will go first with Santiago. Movilidad has been at the forefront of electromobility projects, so I would like to hear your experience.
Thank you, Lim. Thank you very much. And yes, in Mexico City, as you may know, all the public transport, especially the BRT system, is concessioned transport, right? So this concession lasts 10 years. So after 10 years, you have to analyze if you keep going with the diesel buses or make the change to the electric ones. So the first key point is that one. You have to analyze if you want to continue to the diesel buses or to make the change. In our case, we decided to make the change because if you don't make the change in that time, you have to wait another 10 years. Okay, so what we do, first of all, we decided to make the change to the electric buses, and then we have to making this pilot test with a lot of buses. We tried like 5 types of different buses. Sorry. We tried like 5 type of buses, and at the end we start making also the negotiations with the government, and we map all the things that we wanted to achieve. So I want to summarize like in 3 points. First of one, you have to analyze the charging infrastructure, because in our case, it's not only to buy the buses and plug it into the connectors like your house. In our case, we make this analyze, and we saw that the 60 buses we will need 5 megawatts of electricity. So that, for making an example, you can supply 100,000 people for these 5 megawatts. Okay, so it's a lot of energy that you have to concentrate in one single point. So after that, we start making a lot of meetings with the federal government, with the local government, and start to modeling this new case. Okay, for our good luck, the government was in our side. They gave us all the facilities to make this really, really fast, because also we were going to be the pioneers in this new milestone in Mexico City. Second one, how we manage all the electrical fleet. This is a really, really key point. Sebastian already mentioned. We start training from all the bus drivers. The bus drivers, we have also a certification from the manufacturer to all the mechanics. You know, if a mechanic was not certified, he cannot touch any vehicle. So we can have a security that all the maintenance will be 100 with 100 quality. And also we have to train to the users, because most of the users are really used to hear the bus coming. And if they don't hear that bus coming, we could have a lot of accidents in the BRT system. So that's a really, really key one. And another point that we have to consider is all the financial. Okay, it's not only to buy one single bus. Here you have to see all the investment that you have to make, and in what time of period you will have the return of that. So in our case, as you may know, the electric buses are more expensive than a diesel one, but in the long range, you know, all the costs are really, really low. So we managed to remake the concession, to renew it at 15 years, so we can financially pay the buses, right? And also we negotiate the pay per kilometer in Mexico City in our fleet. And also the last thing that we really focus on was on the continuous training on our on our buses drivers, because when you migrate from a diesel to an electric vehicle, you have to be worrying about the life of the batteries. Okay, in our case, we are considering the changing of the batteries in the year 7 or in the 8th year. Okay, so if you drive more aggressively, you drive more, in a different way, you can start damaging the batteries. So it's a continuous training that we are always looking for to innovate in that part. We use also a lot of technology that come along the buses in specific, in a specific thing, the telemetry. That is a really, really key issue for us to continuously start analyzing and see how they are driving, so we can have a better standardized in operation, and also to have a care of the batteries, so we can list to these 8 years. So in a simple way, or in a resume, and we can put it in these three points: the charging infrastructure, how you manage the complete fleet, and all the financing thing to make this migration. That's how we solve it in Mexico, and we are continuous in other states in Mexico.
Thank you, Santiago. I mean, being a pioneer in the transition is not easy. So probably on the next round, we could go deeper on how does the company manage the operational and financial risk a very, very specific way. So it's admirable to you that the company decided to prioritize the mobility and the standards of the passengers. So congratulations that. Uh, let's move now with Ulises. Ulises, Flecha Amarilla has made efforts to promote electromobility not only outside of Mexico City, but also in a long distance transportation, which is not common here in Mexico. Uh, what has the experience been like? What lessons have you learned? Ulises, Flecha Amarilla ha hecho esfuerzos para promover esta transición a la electromovilidad y con la particularidad de que no solo lo hace fuera de la Ciudad de México, sino que también en un sector que es el transporte largo recorrido, larga distancia. ¿Cuál ha sido tu experiencia y qué lecciones han aprendido? Te escuchamos.
Gracias, Selim. Bueno, creo que esta parte justamente es la clave. Nosotros operamos el servicio foráneo y cuando hablamos del transporte entre ciudades, estamos hablando de variables totalmente diferentes a las urbanas. Juega un poquito diferente. En esta parte, pues es clave las distancias, es clave la autonomía. Hablando del transporte federal, no recibimos ningún subsidio para el proyecto. Entonces, en ese sentido, voy a explicar cuáles fueron los desafíos y los retos que vivimos como compañía para lograr colocar el transporte eléctrico entre ciudades. Primeramente, yo te diría que la parte de cultura interna juega un papel importante. Fue esencial familiarizar a la empresa con toda la nueva tecnología, con los nuevos objetivos de disminución de emisiones y sobre todo eliminar mitos y temores que se tienen al respecto. El análisis económico, como un segundo punto, juega un papel importante. Si bien estamos hablando de que los vehículos eléctricos representan una inversión inicial mucho más intensa, en el tiempo hay ciertos beneficios. Entonces es importante demostrarlo. Y la otra parte que tenemos como uno de los desafíos fue la falta de conocimiento. Aquí, bueno, somos expertos en todo el tema de autobuses, pero tradicionalmente se ha operado con unidades de combustión interna. Es importante entender cómo será el mantenimiento, la infraestructura requerida, la normatividad aplicable y, bueno, sobre todo la configuración de los vehículos muy acorde a cada una de las rutas. Para el tema cultural, que fue el primer punto en mención, nosotros volteamos a ver las bases, que es nuestra filosofía. Hicimos un ajuste y modificamos la visión que tenemos como compañía. Declaramos para el 2030 transformar la industria de la movilidad, siendo una empresa sostenible con innovación, experiencias y servicios integrales. Aquí se destacan 4 de los pilares fundamentales de nuestra planeación estratégica, pero quiero matizar o quiero hacer énfasis en la parte sostenible y de innovación, que es lo que el día de hoy nos ocupa. Hablando de la parte muy específica de sostenibilidad, lo hacemos en 4 perspectivas. Queremos ser sostenibles desde la perspectiva económica, desde la perspectiva social, también cubrimos rutas que no son rentables, pero ofrecemos un servicio a las comunidades, desde la perspectiva de gobernanza y sin duda la perspectiva ambiental. Hablando del tema ambiental, fue muy importante el poder cambiar el chip. No todo es económico en las compañías. Es importante incorporar las variables de impacto ambiental. Aquí en pantalla les estoy colocando del lado izquierdo un gráfico que explica un poco el comportamiento, la composición de los gastos que tiene una empresa operadora. Primero, compartir que el 52% de los costos totales son costos de operación. Y dentro de los costos de operación, el 40% prácticamente es combustible. Si lo vemos de nivel general, en todos los costos, el 20% es diésel. Entonces, cualquier acción que se coloque para poder, digamos, ahorrar combustible o mejorar los rendimientos de diésel, estamos impactando directamente al resultado de la compañía. Entonces, sí es importante cuando se selecciona un vehículo el cómo se comportará el tema del diésel. Sin embargo, nosotros incorporamos también una variable de decisión que tiene que ver con el tema de emisiones. Del lado derecho estoy colocando un gráfico que nos puede representar cada una de las tecnologías asociadas a cada una de las normas ambientales. En el eje vertical podemos ver todo el tema de materia particulada, En el eje horizontal podemos ver todo el tema de NOx o óxido de nitrógeno y las tecnologías que la compañía opera de combustión se encuentran operando bajo el régimen de la norma Euro 6, que es el cuadrito más pequeño que podemos ver a la derecha. Este fue, digamos, la antesala o el primer paso para brincar a la electromovilidad. Cuando hablamos de vehículos eléctricos, estamos hablando de cero emisiones. Fue un paso importante para nosotros y bueno, ahí nos encontramos. Algo que quiero resaltar sobre el contexto México, a diferencia de otros países que por ahí estuve escuchando. En el caso muy particular de México, tenemos instalados a los fabricantes de chasis, de carrocerías y de autobuses integrales. Esto permite el desarrollo de la tecnología para autobuses en el país, pero también permite adquirir los vehículos de combustión a un costo mucho menor que los países que están importando. Digamos que no tenemos toda la carga de la logística o de la parte de aranceles y como lo podemos ver en el gráfico de la derecha, los países que importan adquieren los vehículos más caros de combustión y la brecha para poder brincar a la tecnología eléctrica es mucho menor que para México. Entonces, es positivo para México en el sentido de que ha tenido acceso a esta tecnología, pero representa una variable o una restricción para hacer un cambio tan rápido a la parte eléctrica. Estoy colocándoles en pantalla desde la perspectiva económica o de los desafíos que estuvimos viviendo. Les mencionaba que de inicio el vehículo eléctrico representa una inversión más alta, que puede ir del 1.5 a 2.5 veces más que lo que viene siendo un vehículo a diésel. Sin embargo, hay que ver el proyecto en el tiempo, hay que cambiar un poquito el chip. Si bien representa más inversión al inicio, en el tiempo tenemos ahorro en cuestión de combustible y en tema de mantenimiento. Visto combinado, los ahorros de energía y de servicios podrían disminuirse en 2/3 partes. Aquí estoy colocando un ejemplo con datos reales, donde la tecnología se vuelve equiparable al cuarto año, es decir, a partir del quinto año ya se pueden empezar a ver beneficios tangibles en la parte económica por el tema de cambio de tecnología. Pero quiero resaltar algo que es clave. Es importante la configuración del producto. Entre más baterías lleve, sin duda es mayor autonomía, pero también representa más inversión y más costos. Cuando hablamos de electromovilidad, el día de hoy, pues ya la vemos presente en muchos lugares, ¿no? Ya la vemos como parte de una realidad. Sin embargo, no siempre fue así. Hace algunos años, la parte de electromovilidad, pues únicamente estaba presente en los autos particulares. En nuestro caso, volteamos a ver el mundo, visitamos en el 2018 a China, estuvimos con 7 de los principales fabricantes de autobuses para conocer todos los procesos de fabricación de los vehículos eléctricos, pero también para ver las pruebas y ver cómo estaban operando en algunas ciudades de China. En el 2019 estuvimos por ahí presentes en Chile. Aquí estoy colocando unas fotografías previas al arranque de 200 vehículos eléctricos. Recuerdo que eran 100 BYD y 100 por ahí unidades Yutong. Y también cómo estaban haciendo los preparativos de las estaciones eléctricas. Entonces, esto fue importante para nuestro caso porque nos ayuda a entender tanto del producto como de la operación. Si bien estamos hablando de operación urbana o de un sistema urbano, son las bases para poder configurar lo que fue el sistema foráneo. Y bueno, aquí es importante mencionar que también es necesario tener a los aliados correctos. En nuestro caso, el aliado fue nuestro fabricante de la unidad, pero nos ayudó involucrándose tanto al proyecto que nos permitió entender las condiciones técnicas de la ruta para poder configurar el producto ideal para dicha operación. Y bueno, esos fueron como los desafíos iniciales. Ahora les voy a seguir contando de la película. Los vehículos los colocamos en la ruta de León a Guanajuato. Es una ruta que tiene una longitud de 50 kilómetros. Son recorridos aproximadamente de 1 hora. Lo que hicimos fue colocar cargadores tanto en la ciudad de León como en la ciudad de Guanajuato. Colocamos cargadores de 320 kilowatt hora. Los vehículos tienen una autonomía de 350 kilómetros. lo que nos permite hacer la carga un poco más de 1 hora y nos permite pues dar algunas vueltas para poder satisfacer las necesidades de demanda de esta ruta. Coloco aquí en pantalla algunas fotografías de las unidades que se colocaron y bueno, no todo fue eso, miel sobre hojuelas, vivimos algunas problemáticas en la operación o en la marcha, aun cuando la planeación fue rigurosa y nos llevó más de 1 año planear este proyecto para poder hacerlo realidad, estuvimos trabajando muy de la mano con la Comisión Federal para poder tener los contratos adecuados, para poder tener el suministro de energía. Sin embargo, no logramos empatar los tiempos de llegada de unidad, de preparación de conductores respecto al suministro de energía. Esto nos llevó a tener una intermitencia en la operación de cerca de 2 meses y finalmente pues teníamos que evaluar el proyecto, teníamos que generar data, teníamos que confirmar todas esas hipótesis financieras que se habían planteado al inicio y tuvimos que colocar una planta generadora de energía para poder abastecer de inicio estas unidades. Entonces ahí creo que es muy importante pues seguir trabajando de la mano con la comisión para estar listos a los siguientes proyectos. Hasta aquí mi intervención. Gracias, Elim, gracias. Bueno.
Muchas gracias, Ulises. Thank you all for your presentation. I mean, it has been very enriching to learn the detailed cases from each one of your countries. So we are a bit short of time. So for the second part, what I'm going to do is I'll pose a general question, and whoever would like to answer, please go ahead. So we can move to the final part where there's a chance for the Q&A from all the audience. I just have three general questions. The first one is, what recommendations would you offer to accelerate electric bus deployment, particularly from a private sector perspective? And how can operators overcome some common fears and the lack of knowledge? I don't know if the panelists who are interested to answer this question.
Yes, Alim, I would like to answer one.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please, Santiago.
I think one of the key points is to have the legal certain from the authorities, and having this legal certain, I think it's more and more easier to contribute. I think that in Mexico we have been walking this road really fast, and all the knowledge that we have acquired and also make with the government, I think it's really helpful. But when you go to another state, it's completely different and difficult, because they have a lot of different rules. So if we standardize all the rules and all the legal statements, I think that would be really good and easier to achieve this transition from diesel to electric vehicles.
Thank you, Santiago. I mean, we totally agree that legal certainty is fundamental to guarantee the investors. Ulises, go ahead, please.
Gracias, Elim. Bueno, yo te diría como complemento que desde mi perspectiva, sin duda lo primero es una planeación rigurosa. Digo, no basta con comprar los autobuses, es fundamental definir bien la operación, las rutas, la autonomía, la recarga, la vida útil esperada y sin duda el modelo de negocio. Pero desde lo que vivimos también es importante tener el partner adecuado, no solo quien te venda los autobuses, sino quien te ayude a dimensionar el proyecto. Y la tercera parte que creo que es fundamental es el rol, sin duda, del sector público. Las autoridades pueden y deben sumarse a estas iniciativas para facilitar trámites, crear incentivos, fomentar esquemas incluso de coinversión entre el segmento público y privado. Y bueno, esto es lo que creo que si lo llevamos a cabo puede generar que estos proyectos, bueno, además de de acelerarse puedan ser escalables y sobre todo sostenibles en el tiempo.
Gracias, Ulises. Thank you, Ulises. I don't know, before just we'll move to the question from the audience. Jit, Sebastian, is there anything you could add?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, of course, this will vary a lot by the degree of regulation that's already present within the public transport system. So we're in a highly unregulated environment in a market like Africa. What we have found is that the main thing that drives this is economics, and especially if you think about the last, say, 5 years for many private sector bus operators, it's been a very difficult time. First, there was the period of COVID, where through different various government interventions, demand for public transport was forcibly down. Then on top of that, you had rising fuel prices for a number of years. And so it's been a really difficult period. And what we're finding is that it's purely the economic argument that is driving demand and driving adoption. And we're entirely supply constrained here right now in this market because the typical bus operator is trying to relieve themselves of what they see as a much riskier asset in a diesel bus.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'll
Sebastian.
just briefly complement with what you were saying is that in Santiago, we don't have necessarily any specific subsidies or incentives for electrification. So yes, the contracts were modified to give an incentive in terms of time. So if you chose to go electric instead of diesel, you had a longer contract. But aside from that, there weren't any really real incentives. And I think that points again to what Jid is saying. You know, the economic case was strong enough that you could move towards electrification quickly. And from that point of view, what gave investment certainty was these government guarantees and having a regulated system. And that's what allowed for this to scale so rapidly. And this is what's so impressive. You know, when we started talking about these, I remember submitting a project to, I won't say the name, but to a climate financial institution, global institution, and they said, you know, this is never going to happen in Chile. By 2025, we wanted to have 25% electric buses by 2025, starting in 2017, and getting support to do this. They said, no way, this is not going to happen. We're at 40, and we're going to end the year with 69%. So that is because of the economic case. It has nothing to do with, you know, it has less to do with the imperative to have clean transportation than it does from the sense of, you know, this is an economic opportunity to save money and make money.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. So we'll now open the floor for Q&A. So please feel free to ask your questions out loud, or you can, if you decide, write it down in the chat.
Thank you, Elim. We have one by Hernan Hernandez in the chat that we can read after.
Okay, Hernan Hernandez said, what certification the technician need to repair the electric at buses?
Okay, I think that's my case because I said so. Yes, in our case, we have the buses with U-tongue, and we put all the mechanicals, the mechanical team to be to have this certification. It lasts 2 weeks, and it's more into the electrical field, because in the buses, the electrical one, you open the back of the buses, and there are all the modules where all the electrical lines interact. So it's not that easy that one mechanical can touch one of those lines and nothing happens. It's the other way. If one of the mechanical touch one line without knowing what will happen, it's a really, really risky task. So we make a lot of different cases in field, and the mechanicals are really, really trained. So first one, aiming for the safety for the mechanicals, and second one, for the safety of the buses, and to uh, to keep the battery as long as we possible do. So it's a 2-week training, and at the end of these 2 weeks, in this case, you make to all of my mechanics one exam, and they give them an official certification that the mechanic can touch the bus without violating the guarantee of the bus. I don't know if I answered the question, Hernan.
Thank you, Santiago. I think that also it's part of the planning and the purchasing process with the OEM, you know. You need to go hand in hand in order to certify that all the technician units and also the staff from the operators should have this training and know how to do that.
Can I add one other thing, Elaine, because I think this one's very important to consider. So in addition to the training that we receive from the OEM, there needs to be a strategy around the service of the battery. So for us, of course, uptime over the long life of the bus is very important. And the greatest risk to that is honestly the battery. If there's a battery issue, especially a battery issue that requires now a battery as a spare part, that's a very long, slow value chain to be able to get that battery. So for us, we're using buses where we require the batteries to always come from CATL, the largest EV battery manufacturer in the world. And we put in a lot of time over the last year to now become an overseas authorized service agent of CATL, specifically to solve that problem. Because once or twice with BYD, we found that we had a battery issue, and now all of a sudden a bus was down for 5 to 6 months because we were waiting for a battery to come from China. So there needs to be a strategy also around the service and the maintenance of the battery. And sometimes that's a bit separate from the actual bus OEM.
Thank you, Yit. I don't know if there's any other comment regarding this question. If no, I think that Isabel, you had a question, right?
Yeah, but we can move to the questions on the chat. Gracias, Selim.
I don't know, Gabriel, if there's any other question.
Yeah, if you want, I can read them. Jessica Sagun, how many electric buses does Flecha Amarilla currently operate?
Ulises nos preguntan cuántos buses eléctricos actualmente opera Flecha Amarilla.
Sí, bueno, recordar para el foro, son las primeras unidades en el país que operan entre ciudades. Vivimos una etapa de prueba y esta etapa fue diseñada para 2 unidades, son las que están actualmente. Una vez que termine la fase de prueba, revisaremos por ahí las métricas y ya entraremos a un proyecto que podría ser escalable.
Gracias, Ulises. Thank you very much.
Luego hay otra pregunta de Pavel García. ¿Cuál fue uno de los principios básicos para tomar en cuenta dónde colocar la infraestructura de recarga? ¿Los puntos ya contaban con esa capacidad o se generó la demanda para poder cumplir con el objetivo de recarga? No sé para quién lo estás haciendo, Pavel. ¿Quieres comentar si está dirigida a alguien en particular o es para el grupo en general para traducirla?
Bueno, hola, buenos días. Pues solamente soy consultor en temas de electromovilidad y justo estoy trabajando en eso. Pero sí me gustaría saber cuáles son los puntos que se toman en cuenta en otros lados, ¿no? Tanto en Chile como en Kenia, ¿no? Entiendo que no en todos los lugares la regulación aplica de la misma manera, ¿no? Pero sí es básico para este tipo de proyectos. Solamente me gustaría entender cuál es el criterio que utilizan y cómo lo aplican.
Gracias.
¿La puedo traducir
Por favor.
para todos? So the question is, what was one of the basic principles for considering where to place the charging infrastructure? Did the points already have that capacity, or was demand generated to meet the charging objective?
So I can start, because for us that was a very complicated question, because we are not a government regulated bus system. It's a very informal system. While there are routes, there's no schedules or anything like this. And so this really became a process of discovery. And I think you may have seen from one of the slides I showed, we had to build, so we have basically three requirements for our charging. Number one, it has to be directly along the bus operating routes, because this is how the drivers every morning at 3 to 5 in the morning are getting dropped off very close to pick up the diesel buses. And we could not be at a charging place that was very far away from that existing ecosystem of how drivers made their way to the buses. So that was number one. Number two is being very close to the high voltage infrastructure in order to reduce the capital cost of being able to deploy the charging. And then number three is finding a business or a location that was actually willing to let these privately owned buses park overnight, and finding that combination of sites along all of these different routes. In a city like Nairobi and many African cities, we have a hub and spoke model. So basically, all of the different bus routes are coming into the center of the city or going out along these major arteries. And so we had to plan out and find charging along those arteries in order to be able to support the system. And I have to be honest, this has been the biggest challenge to scale. Outside of capital, the biggest challenge to scale has been deployment of the charging infrastructure, finding these sites and scaling the charging ahead of when the buses are coming online.
Thank you very
I can
much.
complement as well.
Yeah, sure.
I'm briefly going to show this slide that I was showing for Pavel. I'm going to answer in English. I'm not sure if you can see the slide right now, but if you can, because I can't see it. But basically, one of the things that happened is that when we move towards this new model to the right, you see the terminals. You see that the terminals are there's this little red mark here. What happened actually was that the country expropriated the terminals. And why? Why did this happen? And why is this so crucial to understanding where the infrastructure is? When we had this previous model, basically the operators owned the terminals and owned the fleets. And when we wanted to move away from this model and make it more competitive, having access to the terminals represented, according to the antitrust court here in Chile, something that was anti-competitive. Basically, it was an advantage that was so big for other actors, an impediment for other actors to come into the business, that the country decided to expropriate the terminals. So first of all, understanding that we basically expropriated the terminals to be able to have access to that and be able to have facilities in terms of bringing other actors into fore. And then the next thing that you need to do in terms of electrifying those terminals is seeing if you have the capacity already installed there, and then going through the processes that you need to do in order to ensure that you have that capacity, which means contacting the utilities and going through a process that's outlined in terms of the normative structure of asking for additional capacity in these spots. But it is crucial to understand that that's one of the biggest bottlenecks that you can have in terms of electrifying a large fleet. And it's very different from Jeet's situation because of the structure of the transportation system, but the scale, and what you'll see also in cities in Mexico, in Mexico as well, the scale of the operations are so big that it becomes a very troublesome or something that you need to really pay a lot of attention to, because it can take a very long time.
Thank you, Sebastian. I mean, we're running out of time, but there's two more questions. Probably you can go very, very quick with the answer. Ulises, nos preguntan, con las dos unidades que actualmente opera Flecha Amarilla, ¿en cuánto tiempo se estima tener el retorno de la inversión en la infraestructura de carga? That's for Ulises, with the two units that are currently operated at Flecha Amarilla, how long is estimated that you will have the return of the investment?
Sí, claro, con gusto. Bueno, compartirles, había hablado de que cada proyecto es diferente y depende del diseño y la configuración. En función de eso está la inversión requerida. En este caso en particular, se colocaron los cargadores en la ciudad de León y en la ciudad de Guanajuato. La capacidad requerida fue de 320 kilowatt-hora. Tienen un costo aproximado de $30,000. Sin embargo, no es que se requiera colocar cargadores cada que se incrementan unidades. La masa crítica de unidades va a ir diluyendo la inversión de la infraestructura requerida. En esta combinación entre la inversión hecha para las unidades y para los cargadores, la recuperación del proyecto se dará entre el cuarto y quinto año.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Uh, we have another question that is, what was the most challenging when you implement e-buses? And it's for everyone. So if any of the panelists would like to answer it.
I'll go first very briefly. I think the first mover. The most challenging thing is getting someone to move first. And once you have that first mover, everything else follows because the technology is sufficiently mature, you have savings, you have a lot of advantages. But in the case of Chile, we had one operator that was really intrigued about testing the technology, and they had a hard time getting electric buses at the beginning. No one wanted to give them, none of the traditional OEMs had electric buses for them. So it was a huge change of paradigm to say, actually, hey, let's go to China and see if they give us buses. And then saying, let's take a bet and move towards this technology. I think that was probably the most difficult thing to happen, because once you had that momentum, everything else became easier. But nothing is really easy when we're talking about, transforming public transportation systems and new technology, et cetera.
Thank you, Sebastian. I don't know if anyone.
I can go.
Yes.
Yeah, for us,
Okay.
you heard from me. It's been charging, and so we were very excited. Of course, when we first introduced electric buses, there was a lot of questions about whether or not these would work, and that first year to 2 years was incredibly exciting because we proved very quickly that yes, they could work. Yes, that they were preferred. Yes, they were saving money. Then came the question of scale, and as we began to scale up, very clearly it became charging, and everybody was always worried about, does a country like Kenya or countries in Africa, do they have enough power to be able to power electric buses? That actually has not been the issue. The issue has been more about the bureaucracy and the issues of finding land, and all of this have been a real challenge and barrier, and one that has to be planned for ahead of time.
Thank you very much, Ed. I mean, we ran out of time. I mean, there's some other questions. I don't know, Isabel, if we can send the answer through email. I think that will be better, just to respect the time from the panelists.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Elim. I mean, I can just see, how we can get going. And as Sebastian said, it's amazing to see the first movers and all the experience, the rich experiences that you have. But thank you very much for your inspiration. I think that's what we are trying to achieve here in Mexico with the Alianza por la Movilidad Sostenible para Todos. I think we need inspiration, and the first movers, what you, Jit, Sebastian, Ulises, Santiago have been doing, is really a source of inspiration. I mean, I know it has not a very easy path, but I think that, the true learning that I'm going with from this great panel is that, we can do this. I mean, whether it's a combination of market or legal frameworks or, whatever, all the different elements that are needed for systemic change, we do need you as the champions to lead the way. So we are very, very grateful, and I leave this conversation very inspired by all your work, and I hope those who were participating, do the same. And if you can all open your videos, if you can, it'd be great to have just a group photo to have this memory of this great conversation, which I hope is the beginning of a longer term agenda for collaboration, of countries in the global south. I think we have a lot to learn from each other, but also, a lot to teach to the rest of the world. The global south, I'm, positive that we are going to be, that force that is needed not only to reduce emissions, but also to address inequalities in our cities, in our countries. So thank you all for your participation. We will be having the recording posted very soon. And also, if the panelists would be generous enough to share your presentations, we will make those available as well. And feel free to reach out to us to follow us in the Alianza we are hoping we can, we already have Sebastian y el Centro de Movilidad Sostenible with all the magnificent team as part of the member, as a member of the Alianza, but we are hoping to continue our collaboration with JIT and obviously CANAPAT. Thank you so much, Aline, for such a great moderation of this panel. Muchas gracias a todos y una foto. Muchas gracias. Tomamos la foto,
Muchas
García.
gracias, colegas.
Thank you. Thank you
Gracias.
for the panelists and
Thank you.
Perfecto.
audience.
Muchas gracias. Gracias a
Un
todas y todos.
gustazo. Chao, chao.
Gracias. Bye.
Gracias.